Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Infinity, and this is Magnetize Yourself, where we talk about life, love, spirituality, and of course, the law of attraction. Are you a twin flame? I know that many people listening to and connecting with this channel are twin flames, so welcome. If you are new, then I hope you find something useful here in this video or on my channel. And if I do resonate with you, please do click the subscribe button to join our community of like-minded, conscious, creative beings here on YouTube. Today we're talking about twin flame stages. So if you answered yes to the question of being a twin flame, I'm really curious to know how you would define what so-called stage that you're in at the moment. Now, I know that these stages aren't really black and white, and I'll get into that in a moment. But the first thing I'm going to do is clear out a few misconceptions about twin flame stages or phases. These are misconceptions that I had myself because when I was first starting this twin flame journey, consciously, of course, we're always on this journey throughout our entire life and really the eternity of our soul. But when I first became conscious of being a twin flame, approximately 5 years ago, I came across many different kinds of twin flame material on YouTube, like I'm sure many of you do as well as you're researching this kind of material. And as I was doing this research, I kept hearing this kind of very cut and dry explanation of the phases, and it went something like this. The first stage was longing for the one, the next stage was glimpsing them, then it was meeting them, and then it was going through the love bubble phase that I made a video about previously. Then after that, there was triggering, running, chasing, usually a separation, and then a reunion at the end of it. Now, I know for some people this is the progression of the stages. It does go this way for many people. But in my own life, I actually found along my own journey that very often these stages could flip from moment to moment. So they weren't always even lasting very long. And other times it would seem like I would move forward into one stage and then go back into a different one. So I'll get into that in a minute, but I just feel that all of that is to say that these phases or stages of the twin flame journey are not so cut and dry as they might appear to be. It's very unique and personal to you and your journey, and specifically the soul intentions you set and your twin flame set, the intentions you set together for how you wanted this journey to unfold. These intentions were actually made on a soul level prior to incarnating here in this lifetime. So in this video, I am going to share my own conception of 10 twin flame stages, but I want to preface by saying once again, these stages aren't necessarily linear and they don't necessarily happen in this order. Also, it isn't necessary for you to experience every single stage in order to be a twin flame. I know there are certain highly evolved souls who come to this lifetime with the intention to meet their twin flame, come together in a harmonious physical union very quickly, and never experience any of the other kinds of stages that we talk about, the more difficult stages like separation, like running and chasing. However, I would say that is a very, very small minority of people. That is not how my personal journey went. I've experienced many of the other stages that I know many of you have as well. So I'm just going to be sharing kind of 10 different stages or phases you can experience as a twin flame in any kind of order and in any kind of length of time. That is kind of the wording I was looking for there, because once again, some of these stages might last a day for some, months or even years for others. So it all really depends on your own personal situation. But my conception of twin flame stages is that it all begins with what I call stage 1, which is the longing. Now, this isn't really something that I coined. This is a pretty universal first stage that you hear people blogging about and speaking about on twin flame channels. So I'm not the first one to say this or anything like that, but this is just something I do resonate with and have experienced. This is the feeling of just knowing that there is someone out there for you. Now, depending on your level of consciousness at the time of this longing, you might already be familiar with the idea of twin flames, and you might say to yourself, I just know I have a twin flame. Like you come across twin flame material, it connects with you, and you just know. For other people, like myself, I wasn't conscious of the twin flame path when I had this longing feeling. So it was more like I would watch Disney movies, hear fairy tales, listen to love songs, and I always, even from a very young age, deeply romanticized these things and just had this knowing that someday I would meet this person who would just sweep me off my feet into this whirlwind of romance, and it would be just the two of us forever. I just held that belief deep in my soul to the point where I really believed, and you might believe in this longing stage, that you are just a hopeless romantic. You might call yourself that even, because you have this feeling that you believe in a kind of love that people around you don't believe in. That in a world of cynics, you still desperately want to believe or do believe that there is someone out there for you. And it's like this knowing that you were just made to love this person and this person was made to love you. But usually at this phase, I find typically people aren't really conscious of exactly who this person is. They, again, usually don't even know the concept of twin flames at this point. It's just this deep and pervasive feeling of longing. The second stage typically is what I like to call the first touch. Touch not necessarily meaning physical touch. This could be any experience in which you spiritually or physically cross paths with your twin flame. The reason I say spiritually or physically is because this first touch, or it could also be called the first meeting, could actually happen in a dream. So it could happen when you are dreaming one night and suddenly you dream of this person, this mysterious stranger, and yet someone who is so deeply familiar to you. And that dream leaves such an impression on you that you can't ever forget about it or forget about this person. It's like they leave this mark on your soul. And then years later, you would meet this person in the physical world, and come to discover that this was your twin flame that you dreamt about. For others, this could literally be a physical meeting. Many twin flames actually meet very young, so they might meet as children, adolescents, teenagers, or adults. So it all depends on your situation, and when I said adults, by the way, because I did say they meet young, they might meet as young adults. So you could meet in your early 20s or mid 20s or something like that, and then experience the rest of these stages later in life. There is just this touch point moment when you connect in some meaningful way with your twin flame. Whatever that means to you. So again, could be a dream, could be in the physical world, could be seeing them on the streets and just having this moment of deep recognition. Usually this is the stage, by the way, that people experience very profound eye connection, eye contact with their twin flame, and eye contact with emphasis on contact, because literally it is like this person is contacting you through their eyes. It's like their energy is enveloping you, connecting with you through the eye connection. So this typically happens at this second stage, and is part of why this first meeting or first touch can be so profound. So after this, usually there is this, and I didn't actually label this as a stage. This isn't one of the 10 stages. Just something to note here is that usually between this first meeting and first touch, spiritually or physically, and then the actual 3D physical meeting and connection point, there's usually a period of preparation, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Oftentimes during this kind of in-between time, between dreaming about this person, or even meeting them in person just once and then separating, usually there is this time, this buffer of time in which a spiritual awakening begins to be ignited in either one or both twin flames. Now, this isn't always the case, but I find very often that the twin flame who is the more spiritually awakened, because usually, again, one counterpart does awaken first, usually this is the twin flame that goes through either some kind of dark night of the soul or begins their path of spiritual awakening or something along those lines that kind of begins to energetically prepare their life for the entrance of their twin flame. Now, again, this could happen to one twin flame, both, or even neither. It really just depends on your situation. But then after this period of typically preparation, now comes the powerful 3D physical meeting. Now, I know this is kind of confusing, like what's the difference between the actual touch points and the true meeting? And I feel like this really will just depend on your situation. For some of you, again, it could be just because the first time you met, you didn't fully speak to one another, you didn't exchange contact information, you may have just locked eyes, you may have just seen each other in a dream. Usually you just cross paths in some way, again, spiritually or physically. But then in this true 3D meeting, this is when you truly connect in the physical world. So I also should say, and forgive me because I know when I speak on these things, it's a bit convoluted just because there are so many different things I'm channeling at once and so many different experiences you all are having. And I'm trying to really present a very all-encompassing view of everything you could experience just so you can apply it to your own situation. So thank you for those of you who bear with me as I'm doing this kind of explaining, trying to find the physical words to explain these very spiritual experiences. But usually during this true meeting, it can either happen online, virtually, because yes, it is possible to go through this serious 3D connection point just through messaging over text or over social media, or it can happen, of course, in the physical world. But the key is here, I believe a big difference between the first touch and this actual true 3D meeting is there is a recognition, a very strong shared recognition. Because very often during the first meeting, it either happens in a dream or it's that you made eye contact somewhere or barely crossed paths. And while you may have made an impression on each other, and most likely did, it may not have been a deep enough impression to truly cause you to begin researching what is this thing I'm experiencing. Usually after this true physical meeting is when twin flames find the term twin flame. Again, not always, but very often this is when the research starts, when they start frantically looking up, what does this sign mean? Why am I getting this synchronicity? And that's the other thing about this time or this phase. Very often, this is when the synchronicities intensify. Now, of course, the synchronicities and signs were always there and always will be there, but they usually become very, very intense right after this physical meeting. And I don't have a clear explanation for this, but intuitively, I feel this happens because all of these signs and synchronicities are intended to spark this very intense curiosity in each twin flame as to what is the nature of this connection? Why are we feeling and experiencing these profound things? Who are we to one another on a soul level? I feel these synchronicities are meant to make each counterpart begin to ask these questions. So then After this usually begins the love bubble. Now, this can be experienced by one or both twin flames, but usually both. And I have an entire separate video just on the love bubble phase. There is a lot of material out there about this phase. But essentially, this is the time when you will fall harder, faster, more exclusively, more intensely for this person than not only than you ever have for anyone else, but also more than you probably ever imagined possible. If you're like me, you might be one of those people who was a hopeless romantic, but maybe you'd been hurt in the past or brokenhearted, and you may have thought, I'm never going to be able to fully let someone in, to fully trust someone, to fully fall in love again. But your twin flame will break down all of your walls, all of your rules, totally just envelop you in a love that sweeps you off your feet quite literally, because this love, this moment of physical connection literally causes this energy merge between twin flames that I speak about often, that literally does raise your vibration to the point where you are capable of accessing the higher dimensions, the fifth dimension. So this is often also where twin flames experience even more, just an avalanche of spiritual signs. So not only are they seeing these strange coincidences, synchronicities, seemingly impossible coinciding events between them and their twin flame, but also oftentimes there is very conscious telepathy, shared dreams, feeling physical or emotional sensations at the same time. All of this tends to get very intense during the love bubble phase. Then after this love bubble phase, which again can last days, weeks, months, or years, just depending on your situation, at this point, the energy from that energy merge that happens between these twin flames begins to settle. And as it settles, it now begins to work through all of the blocks within us. So obviously, as I speak about often, throughout our lifetime, just living in this broken society, we pick up many negative and limiting beliefs and ideas that become stored in our energy, that become represented by these energy blocks. This is why twin flame energy, when we first absorb it, quickly and intensely raises our vibration, but then it tends to, in most cases, come back down again, because these blocks are still there and must be worked through over time. Usually these blocks can't just be eliminated all at once. So then begins what we call the triggering, or the mirroring and triggering, or some people refer to this time as an emotional purging kind of time, because this is when we are truly confronted with all of our shadow aspects. And what do I mean by shadow aspects? Parts of ourself that either we repressed or that were rejected by others, to the point that they became part of our shadow self, which essentially means all of us that is outside the light of our consciousness. So we are no longer aware of these traits, which usually we would label as negative traits. Because we have repressed them for so long, they've become absorbed into our unconscious, but are still deeply rooted in our energy. So our twin flame, their entrance into our life physically, is meant to assist us in a very accelerated soul growth and expansion, an accelerated raising of our vibration. But in order for this to occur, we must first release and work through all of our own internal triggers, blocks, and wounds. And of course, our twin flame must do the same simultaneously. So this time normally looks extremely messy, because during this period of time, twin flames are often still just coming off of the high of the love bubble phase, and they are often still in very active communication. They might even still be in the same physical space much of the time. And so a lot of times this triggering can become very intense because twin flame energy, the ways in which we pass energy back and forth between one another so quickly, can work both directions. And it makes sense when you think about it, because when you're sharing so much energy with someone, mirroring everything back to them, if that's going in a positive direction, it can spiral upwards very, very fast. You can raise each other's vibration very quickly. But of course, it only makes sense that it would work both directions. If you are feeling negatively about something, anxious, insecure, your twin will reflect this back to you, and then you will reflect it back to them even more intensely, and you can spiral downward in the same way you spiraled up previously. So very often, this is the time where twin flames experience very intense, what feel to be downward spirals, because they continue to mirror each other's wounds, and in this way feel increasingly triggered. And this usually is when the ego is the loudest. So the reason the ego gets louder at this time is because it now feels threatened, which sounds kind of ironic, because how could the entrance of divine love, unconditional love into your life, cause you to feel triggered? And I know this is a topic of conversation in the spiritual community, and people have different ideas and beliefs about this. Personally, I believe it's because we are not trained to understand or accept unconditional love, which means that when unconditional, truly unconditional love is given to us or presented to us, we oftentimes reject it in different ways. Just because we have these societally programmed limiting beliefs and blocks that prevent us from fully allowing true unconditional love and reflecting that back. So because the ego is triggered quite literally by this presence of deeply divine unconditional love and feels itself, usually even its own identity, being triggered, right? Because during this time, and I'll just move into the next phase, there's also simultaneously an ego death usually going on here. Now, many of you might know the term ego death from spiritual awakening. And essentially, this is when our material lives, or I should say anything about our material lives or relationships, jobs, really anything in our life that is out of alignment with our true soul path or purpose begins to crumble, begins to fall away. Now, for some of us, this might not be that intense, just because if you've been living very consciously, you've been very awakened, you might be very aligned with your soul path, and you might not have many things in your life that need to be shifted, that need to, crumble some things. But for others of us, for most of us, there is so much of our lives that we've built from this inauthentic space. And this was the case for me. There was so much of my life that I had pursued or thought was a part of myself, or even something that I loved, just because I was trying to meet others' expectations of me or my life, or what I believed society wanted out of me. And I never truly had dug deep into my own soul and asked, what do I want on a soul level if I'm being truly authentic with myself? And these are the questions that begin to be presented at this point in the twin flame path, and cause this usually very messy and chaotic time where we feel very alone. We might lose our job. We might drop out of school. We might find it harder to focus on things we used to have passion for, or lose passion altogether for these things. We might lose friends. We might feel disconnected from our family or our community. This is a very, very challenging time. And I just want to pause and say, if you are currently going through this, I see you and I support you. I know this is one of the darkest and hardest times of the twin flame path, and you are not alone in what you are feeling or experiencing. So again, this stage, ego death, can happen coinciding with any of these other stages. It can happen simultaneously with the emotional purging and triggering. It can even actually start for some at the first touch point with their twin flame, or even before that. It really just depends on your situation and where your timeline of spiritual awakening falls within this twin flame journey. So again, as a result of all of this emotional purging, this mirroring, this triggering, this intensity, usually at this point, and again, I say usually, this isn't all twin flames, but most begin to experience a period or several periods of separation. So this separation is usually thought of as physical separation. This is just the traditional, conventional understanding of twin flame separation. People usually think of twin flames like being in a relationship during the love bubble phase, which of course they are not always, but sometimes they are in a relationship romantically, physically. And then they think of them like breaking up during the physical separation, moving like across the country or across the world from each other, or whatever the case may be. But this separation doesn't necessarily need to be physical. It could also be emotional. It could be emotionally distancing yourself from this person. It could be cutting off contact with them altogether or limiting contact with them. It could even be still being physically around them, but just giving them more of the silent treatment, not fully opening up to them. Essentially, there's this moment, it's kind of hard to put into words, but during the love bubble phase, there's this overflow, this avalanche of emotion, outpouring of love. It's very intense. It's overwhelmingly beautiful, the kind of beauty that literally would bring you to your knees crying, kind of love feeling. And then there's suddenly, usually during the separation phase, this pulling back in some ways. So you might still be quote unquote friends, but things just feel off. There might be distance. There might be coldness. There might literally be a physical space. It all depends on your situation. And again, this can last just as one block of separation that lasts for years, or this could be a weird period of kind of feeling separate for a month, and then having a month where things kind of go back to almost love bubble, but with some emotional purging and triggering, and then that kind of intensifies, and then there's more of a separation. So it can kind of go back and forth here, and often does. And during this time, now I'm going to speak on the next very commonly labeled phase, which is the running and chasing. So not always, but usually during this separation, there is one twin flame, either the divine feminine or the masculine, who is more spiritually conscious or awakened, or at this point kind of knows what's going on in this connection, and has usually at this point attached it to the label of a twin flame. They know this person is their twin flame, is their counterpart, have a strong awareness of this, and very often this person becomes labeled the chaser, meaning they more actively try to pursue communication, greater, deeper connection with this person. However, usually this in itself, although this person is usually more spiritually awakened, I don't want to say that this comes from a wound, although it does in a sense, but I want to say that it is this feeling of wanting to chase is actually a catalyst for the chaser's spiritual growth even further, because it's only natural. I don't want to condemn the chaser here for feeling these feelings of wanting to reach out, wanting to communicate, because the reason they are feeling this way is just because they have a deeper, more conscious understanding of the fact that this is their twin flame. And because of this, the separation it's even more painful for them, because they are now consciously aware of their soul tie to this person. And also they simply can't help but want to communicate, to be around this person, knowing that this is their divine counterpart, is their twin flame. However, this feeling of wanting to chase causes the chaser to actually end up doing usually very deep introspection on themselves, finding unhealed wounds within themselves, and healing these energy blocks, healing these wounds. And this is very, very challenging. It's one of, I would say, the hardest parts of the twin flame journey is being the so-called chaser during this running and chasing kind of dynamic, and having the courage to love both yourself and your twin flame unconditionally enough to accept things the way they are in the physical world, and yet hold space for a physical reunion, which I know sounds kind of complicated, but it's this very calm and unconditionally loving energy that the chaser has to find and stabilize within themselves. And usually we refer to this as surrender. So running and chasing has this energy of pushing or pulling back. And again, it can flip back and forth. So the chaser usually very often is the divine feminine, though not always, but it can flip between one and the other. What ends this phase is having the courage to fully surrender to the unconditional love aspect of this connection. And by unconditional, I mean totally not based on any physical circumstances or conditions whatsoever, not dependent on what that person is or is not saying or doing, or what the separation looks like, or really what anything looks like in the physical world, but truly allowing yourself to surrender. I mean, it is often called the surrender phase, and it's hard to find a better word for it. It's truly just a releasing, a deep level trusting, not just of yourself, of your person, but also of the divinity and the eternal, unbreakable nature of your connection. It is a relaxing of the ego. And as soon as this happens, it energetically opens the door for the so-called runner or the other counterpart to begin moving forward in the physical world as well, or begin their own or continue their own healing process. I hope all of that makes sense. I know I'm trying to reach for the right words to explain these things, because I feel we're talking about a lot of really complex dynamics here. And then as the ego relaxes, usually again, this opens up greater connection in the physical, greater communication. And ultimately, this leads to the final stage we often refer to as reunion. I like to call this reunion in the 3D, just because there is never truly any separation on a spiritual, esoteric level. Twin flames are always eternally connected to one another. It is just our perception that there is ever a separation. But really, as you can see through these stages, there is this overarching theme of turning the attention away from the physical, turning the attention back within ourselves, choosing to introspect, choosing to identify our own triggers, our own wounds for the purpose of healing them, doing that deeper level shadow work or energy work, however you refer to that releasing of our own triggers and wounding. So for this purpose, I have created a 7-chakra twin flame subliminal meditation. So this is really designed to assist you in uprooting any limiting beliefs or blocks that are stored within your energy field. And as a result, this allows you to really allow yourself to create that natural magnetism, or I should say to allow it, not even to create it, because twin flames really are naturally magnetic, incredibly magnetic for one another, which is why they are brought together across all time, space, and distance into this physical meeting in the first place. The only thing that prevents this natural magnetism to fully culminate and bring them together in this physical reunion are these internal blocks, these energy blocks that prevent us from fully connecting with our twin flame in the 3D. So if you would like to access my 7-chakra twin flame subliminal meditation, the link to this will be in the pinned comment and the description box under this video. This subliminal comes from my website, soundandsoulful.com, where I've created over 100 subliminals for all areas of life. So as you can see on the screen, I have subliminals for physical appearance changes, for mood shifts like confidence and happiness, for material manifestations like money and success, and I do have an entire section of subliminals dedicated specifically and exclusively to twin flames. So be sure to check out my website and explore these subliminals to deeply reprogram your subconscious mind and manifest your desires in life. Thank you so much for joining me here in this podcast today. I hope you found something useful as you were listening, and if so, I would love for you to write to me in the comments. I love reading all of your comments, and I am so grateful for each and every one of you for sharing your time and your energy here with this community. I hope you have a wonderful, beautiful rest of your day. Follow me on Instagram at Magnetize Yourself for more content, and I'll talk to you again in the next podcast.